Welcome to the STEM Pathways with Rohan Sharma podcast. We're diving into the exciting world of science, technology, engineering, and math. In each episode, we share exciting stories, groundbreaking research, and inspiring interviews with experts and enthusiasts who are pushing the boundaries of innovation. Whether you're a student, a professional, or just curious about how the world works, join us as we explore the endless possibilities of STEM. Let's get started. Today, I'll be interviewing Lowell Ricklefs, who has a bachelor's degree from UW Madison in electrical and computer engineering. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Rohan. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for coming on the podcast. So to get started, I wanted to ask what made you interested in computer and electrical engineering in the first place? And did you discover you like this back in high school or while you were at college?
I think it kind of fell down to skill set. My dad was an engineer, though he was mechanical, and math and physics were interesting to me, and they were easier than some of the other courses. So I thought a field that kind of leveraged those strengths would be the logical place to go.
Yeah. So what was your experience like at UW?
Well, it was great. I mean, this is actually I didn't plan this. This is totally by coincidence, but this is my handmade Badger mug that I made with my daughter last year for her birthday. We went to one of those places where you can like paint your own mugs. It was incredible. I think Madison is it's a fantastic school. The engineering school is top notch. It's one of the best in the country, if not the world. It's got great recognition, but I think Madison is really well rounded as well. So it's not just smart people. It's smart people that are curious and interested in a lot of things other than just academics, which I think is important because life is about more than just academics and being smart. So you have to interact with other people, at least for the next few years till AI takes over. Uh,
But yeah, definitely. And then I live right next to UW Madison. I have a lot of family who went there, so I've seen how good the student life is, especially compared to other schools. But yeah. So what was your experience like doing studying computer and electrical engineering? I heard it's one of the harder majors. I don't know what it was like back then.
it was hard. I think a lot of it just depends on what you're good at. The physics and calculus again was very logical. I don't want to say it was easy, but it was very doable. Some of the advanced math, like linear math, was tough. Some of the advanced, you get up into the 300 level circuit classes were hard. I mean, they definitely will bend your brain. So I think it's very doable. If you, I think go to class, uh, do your homework, work with others. It's all very doable, but it's definitely hard. I don't know what the numbers were, but I feel like we probably lost 20 to 30% of the people that started didn't finish. So I think some people kind of get weeded out.
Yeah, I've
And
heard a lot
or
about those first year classes.
yeah. Yeah. No, it's definitely tough, but it's a badge of honor. I mean, if you make it through the rest of your life, if people find out, just through social that you get your electrical engineering degree, people are pretty impressed. I think chemical engineer was considered the toughest. Electrical engineering was the second toughest. So, and I won't pick on the engineering fields that people felt weren't as tough. So,
But yeah, so what was your first job out of college?
so, so what's interesting? So, I actually had an internship with a company in McFarland, Wisconsin, my senior year, uh, as a well, it was an internship, and I got a taste of sales. So I actually worked for a Milwaukee company, Rockwell Automation, as a sales engineer, and actually ended up working there for 18 years. So I started off as their training program as a rookie sales guy, and then I was a branch manager, larger regional manager, and then actually a global vice president, and then a business manager for the software group.
Yeah. And what was your next job?
Well, I left the big company and went to work for a startup. I always liked startups and small companies. I went to work for online market research data collection company with less than 1 million in revenue as their VP sales and helped scale that up to 50 million. And that was later acquired by a much larger firm. And then I'll talk about the third one. Then I went to work for a French company that was a competitor. I was there for 6 years. lived in France for 3 years as their chief operating officer. And then I left there and went to work for a true startup with zero revenue, Techstars company called FlexMinder, and was the CEO for 6 years. And that company was eventually acquired as well by a company in Chicago. And then I founded an M&A firm, which is what I do now. So I do M&A. I help small software companies to get acquired.
Yeah. So, as if anyone looks through my recent videos, I've talked to like a million people from the Bay Area and in the startup world. Have startups changed a lot since like 2004 and 2007, back when you're at your first one, compared to now?
Yeah, they've changed a lot. I mean, it used to be back in, 2004, it took a lot of capital. I mean, you had to, AWS is what really fundamentally changed it. AWS and smartphones changed everything because it used to be that you had to have a lot of infrastructure. You had to lease data room space. You had to go buy servers. You had to get expensive IT people to spin the servers up. So, it took many millions of dollars just to set up the data room. And now you can start programming immediately. If you've got an idea, you can spool up, Amazon, Google, they offer pretty good programs for startups, often credits for free up to a certain point. So it's reduced the barrier of entry by quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So whether it's app based or AWS based, it made it much easier.
Can you talk a little bit more about the technical side of those startups you're working on earlier? Like the first one, then the one where you're in France.
Uh, yeah, like what's behind it or the product itself?
Yeah, like the product.
Like so, sure. So the first company, actually, they were competitors. So they basically did the same thing, but they supplied online respondents to take surveys. So, for example, Procter and Gamble has a new product and they're looking to name it. And they want to figure out what the name is. So you could crowdsource it, but they want to get nationally representative samples. So they want to make sure that they get people that are geographically represented, and then age groups, and then every subgroup you can think of. They want to make sure they get representation. They get the opinions of people before they launch it and make expensive mistakes. So it's kind of a core pillar of large consumer CPG companies to do a lot of market research.
Mhm. And then your role as the chief operating officer is more on the business side.
More on the business side, still had responsibility for revenue on the sales side, but it was a relatively small French company that wanted to become larger. So there was we call it organic growth. So they're doing what you're currently doing better and faster. But then we acquired a number of other companies as well. So a big part of it was buying a company in the U.S. to get a U.S. footprint, and we bought some companies in Europe as well. So learning how to do M&A, buy other companies, integrate companies was a big part of what we did. And then just culturally learning how to do business in different countries was super interesting. And I highly encourage anyone that has the opportunity to do that and has any interest whatsoever to do it. It's a lot of fun.
Well, and then when along this track do you kind of switch away from engineering and get more to the business side, and what made you want to do that?
Well, it really started with that internship. I mean, when I graduated from Madison, I really had to choose like a technical sales route or the engineering route. And it was a pretty big deal because I thought if I go down the technical sales route, uh, it, I don't think anyone's going to hire me as an engineer because I'll lose those skills. But it was a pretty good opportunity, and so I made the jump. And part of it, well, actually, part of it was, I was computer science as well. So I would call myself a pretty good programmer. Um, but I, there are like this top 10% programmers that were 10 times better than I was. So even if I was in the top 50%, and I realized how good they were, I realized I can't do what they do. And I just thought about spending my days in front of a computer versus being out in the field interacting with clients. And my personality type, I preferred interacting with people more than interacting with a computer. that's really kind of what it came down to. And then beyond that, like on the COO and the business side, I think if whatever you do, whether it's engineering or sales or marketing, your first goal is to get really good at that, and then maybe good at managing people in that area. But then you might want to broaden it, or just have be at the table and interact with the market. If you're in engineering, you might want to interact with the salespeople and the marketing people and the finance people, just because it's interesting. All of those things have to work together. It's like being on a sports team. Everyone has to do their part, or you lose, and you are competing. Companies are competing against other companies, so it is a team sport. And I thought it was interesting to stretch myself, to learn more about things that I didn't know as much about, and probably wasn't naturally as good at. So I had to run fast to try to even be okay at it.
Yeah. So, going back to what you're doing today, can you talk a bit more about your current company?
Yeah. So we do M&A, so mergers and acquisitions. We work with, we call it the sell side. So say you work for a company or start up a company, and they get to 5 or 10 million in revenue, and you want to sell it. It's a complicated process, sales process. So we identify potential buyers. We throw it in a Google sheet. We do a lot of research on the companies. Often we'll find 200 or 300 potential buyers. We'll work with the seller to review those, and then we prioritize those. We help to put together a financial deck. So you've got historical financials and then projections about the future. That's an important piece of what we do. And then we put together a marketing deck. It's called a SIM or a SIP, so confidential information memorandum or confidential information presentation. And then we will take a subset of that. We'll reach out to the buyers. We'll find out if there's interest. We'll try to qualify them, and we keep our client's name out of it, so it's generic on the original outreach. And then they'll sign an NDA if they're interested and qualified. We'll have what we call a fireside chat, so with the founder and the buyer, to kind of get to know each other. And if there's interest, we'll create a short list of those that are interested in submitting. We call an indication of interest. And of the indications of interest, we'll take 2 or 3 finalists to go to a final round and have all day management meetings, go out for dinner, and then the buyers have to. So it's a competition from the buyers. They'll put together a letter of intent, and then we'll work with the seller to negotiate the best letter of intent, work through purchase agreement, due diligence, all that complicated stuff, and get to something that they can sign and close, and then the money gets wired into their accounts, and then we go have a nice dinner, drink champagne.
Yeah.
So
So,
yeah,
what gave you the idea to start this in the first place?
it came about when the company. Well, so I had experience with M&A, working for other companies, either integrating or actually helping to negotiate uh, companies that were bought. And I worked with other investment bankers that do what I do. And I found that they were all very smart, and they understood finances really well, but they weren't natural salespeople. And I questioned why. And historical companies, traditionally, they're sold, and this may get too technical, maybe they're sold on multiples of EBITDA, so of profitability. And traditional companies have heavy assets, they've got work in progress, they've got inventory, they've got intercompany transfer, they've got foreign exchange. So they're complicated financial animals, and it's important to get the EBITDA right. But software companies are actually relatively simple financially. But in theory, a software company is infinitely scalable. So if you've got a company that does 5 million in revenue, and you've got 100 clients, you could get bought by a company that has 1,000 customers, or 10,000 customers that are very similar to yours. And through a simple marketing campaign, they could accelerate your company to 5 or 10 times its current revenue. And because it's software, if it's architected right, it can scale well, and it's extremely profitable growth. So anyway, the reason I say that is I felt that I could do a better job. I had an enterprise. I felt that selling small technology companies was more like selling enterprise software than it was a financial instrument, like a bond, which is how companies traditionally get sold. So I ran the process for the company where I was a co-founder. We were successful. I helped one of our investors run a process for another company, and I realized there was an opportunity out there to help small B2B software companies to get acquired with some senior experience and hands-on approach. So that's what we do. We got a business partners. We got a small team. I got a business partner in London, and we work on 3 transactions a year. But that's kind of how we got started. It was a bit of a leap. It was completely different. I started off engineering, computer science, technical sales, then management, then general management, and now I've kind of come full circle back to pretty focused selling.
Yeah. So for my last question, I wanted to ask if you have one piece of advice for someone who's still in high school or early in college wanting to follow a similar career path as you.
Well, I think kind of a weird career path. Just I've done a lot of different things. I would just say, it feels like life is long, but it goes quickly. So don't, don't, don't be afraid to do things that scare you. Like take a chance. I mean, imposter syndrome, almost everyone has it. I mean, I've dealt with CEOs at hundreds, if not thousands of companies. Most of them feel like at some level, if they were truly honest, and they're usually not, that that they worry that people think they don't really know what they're doing. So everyone's got it. That's okay. Take a chance. Take on more responsibility if you have a chance to. Jump into something that's interesting. I mean, whatever skills you've relied on to be successful to date. So, like through high school, if you've been able to pull it together and get into a college, those same skills you apply to do well in college, you'll pick up more. Uh, Apply those skills to getting a job, and then, but a lot of people get content, which is fine. Actually, I think some people are okay with being content. It can be pretty scary to jump into a new role or go to work in a new country. But I think it makes you feel alive. It can really scare you. You may have some sleepless nights, but it also stretches you to do things you didn't think you were capable of doing. So
Yeah. All right
that'd be
then.
my thoughts.
Thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Thanks, Rohan.